So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming into RUSI this evening. My name's John Louth. I'm the Director of Defence Industries and Society here, and I'll be your host for this evening. I'll introduce our panel in a moment, and what a fantastic panel it is. But I just wanted to, if I may, confirm with you our riding instructions for this evening. The RUSI rule is quite a simple one in many ways. The comments from our speakers in their designated slot is on the record and on camera. The comments during the questions and answer session is off the record, and we would ask everybody to adhere to that, please. If I could ask people to turn their phones and other devices to silent, or if you're over 50, preferably off. And then they can come back at 7:30. We're not due any tests or evacuation drills or anything like that this evening. So if you hear an alarm and you see me running, try and keep up, or more sensibly wait for the other members of staff to direct you to the emergency exits. It's intriguing in many ways, in that future combat air is a strategy whose time has come. And as analysts, we're quite disappointed in a way because we like to be critical, and yet the department developed an early strategy that looked in many ways sensible and progressive, though of course the devil is in the detail. As I understand it, the combat air strategy has 5 key strands as presented at the moment. And I just briefly want to share those with you. It seems to me, at least, to be a vehicle for preserving national advantage and freedom of choice, and that's combat capability advantage as much as anything, not an abstract advantage. Things that we used to think about in terms of sovereign capability. The second strand is that it is overtly internationally focused, and it's partnered focused. Now, we don't know in detail what that means yet, but the principle is a good one. And that focus is strategic, operational, capability-centric, it's around resilience, and it has clear economic benefits as well, potentially. The third strand is that it protects, harnesses and develops UK technology and intellectual property, whatever we mean by that as we go forward into this century. And those elements, complex elements, are sourced both onshore and offshore, making a virtue of the international focus and the partnership focus. It is clearly about interoperability and collaboration, and I've read international partnering a number of times in the strategy as presented in the summer. And the fifth strand is that, and this is significant, it initiates the acquisition program. It is a starting point for something substantial, and that is to replace Typhoon and deliver an initial operating capability by at least 2035. So those 5 things are what this strategy is about. And as the UK government matures that intent, it will also have to continue to invest in Typhoon and other key capabilities whilst learning from them for the future programme. So that's a very tall, complex set of requirements and activities, it seems to me. To help me unpack that and to put meat on those rather slender bones, we have a panel like no others in many ways. I'll start with Air Marshal Stuart Atha, D Commander Operations for the RAF. He's been a UK Air Defence Commander and an operational commander at a whole range of levels within his career, and in 2011 was head of MOD Libyan operations team. He's a fantastic friend to RUSI and a great advocate for UK air power in all of its guises. But he's a critical advocate. He's a thoughtful advocate. And I think what we get from Stu is frank and honest reflections. Charles Woodburn, the Chief Executive Officer of BAE Systems plc, needs very little introduction. BAE is the largest defence company onshore, but with enormous international reach and pedigree. And I've just spent 2 weeks with BAE Systems and colleagues in Australia, and I'm just in awe at how BAE Systems is a local company wherever it happens to be, and I think that's important as we develop notions of national capability within an international collaborative stance. Prior to taking the reins of BAE, Charles was the CEO of the Expo Group. He's got a PhD in engineering from Cambridge, but he never uses Dr. Woodburn, which is a bit of a miss in my view. And much more interestingly, he's got an MBA from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where I've taught now and again, so that's fantastic. So thank you, Charles, for coming. We'll then hear from Air Chief Marshal Professor Sir Brian Burridge, who's been Commander for National Joint Command Iraq in 2003, Commander-in-Chief Strike Command. He's been the Senior Vice President of Leonardo, Chair of the Defence Solutions Centre, and now he's taken the reins of the Royal Aeronautical Society earlier this month, for which we congratulate you, Brian. I don't think there's a better person, again, to comment reflectively on what Future Combat Air as a programme and as a capability means for us in the UK. And just to complete probably the best panel I've seen in RUSI for a while, we have Richard Berthon, who's the Director for Strategic Programmes within the Ministry of Defence. Richard's rare game. It's very unusual to have a Director for Strategic Programmes in the Ministry of Defence to be on the record, so we're looking forward very much to what Richard has to say.
Probably a good reason.
He's been a counsellor for defence policy, which also brings a nuclear brief in our embassy in Washington, D.C. At the moment, just by a conservative estimate, he manages a portfolio in excess of 1 billion per annum. The key strategic and complex defence programmes within the UK are his, and he has a special focus on international and collaborative programmes, which is pretty useful for Future Combat Air. So without any further ado, I thought it would be really interesting to start with Air Marshal Atha, then follow that with Mr. Woodburn, then Professor Burridge, and finally concluding with Mr. Berthon. Thank you.
John, sirs, ladies, gentlemen, it's great to be here. I see so many, I would say friendly, but certainly familiar faces. It's also great, as you say, John, to share the stage with such a varied panellists. But I realise that if I'm not careful, that with so many of us speaking on this subject, there is definitely the danger of repetition. But I do have the advantage of going first. But to perhaps help with deconfliction, I just thought I would frame my remarks from a sort of rather narrower perspective of my current job, as you've heard, as head of the RAF's front line. Now, whilst my comments will hopefully resonate with the combat air strategy, I am someone who is more steeped in the delivery of operations today and tomorrow, not someone immersed in the acquisition process. But hopefully by laying out the requirements of the warfighter, if you like, I will set an appropriate foundation on which my fellow speakers can build. As you might expect of a rather needy warfighter, my combat air requirements form a rather long list, some of which you've heard. They include responsiveness, precision, survivability, lethality, agility, connectivity, supportability, interoperability, adaptability, and affordability. That's a lot of ability. Now, time obviously prevents an adequate treatment of each one of these elements. But if delivered, if satisfied, they will deliver both the operational advantage and the freedom of action we need as armed forces and as a country. I am a demanding customer, quite simply because the threat demands it. Unlike the threats we have dealt with in recent decades, we face a state with both great power ambition and pariah state behaviour. This is a state whose capability to operate across the spectrum of conflict and in all warfighting domains grows quicker than expected. The threats we face are advanced, comprising new systems as well as digital upgrades to legacy systems. Our speed of capability development, therefore, will need to keep pace with their speed of capability upgrade. And unlike perhaps the experience of recent operations, our potential adversaries are targeting our strengths. They're not trying to defeat us with low technologies. They are developing advanced fifth-generation aircraft and missile systems, and they are exporting them. The appearance of both S-300 and Su-57 in Syria, perhaps, highlight an example of this. The relative freedoms that we have enjoyed in the skies over Afghanistan and Iraq can no longer be assumed. And we must expect that in the future, control of the air will be contested, putting at risk this critical enabler of joint action. Now, looking around, I rather suspect much of your interest is on that longer-term combat air strategy. But I hope you'll understand that when faced with the threat that I have just described, my concern is nearer term and is focused on unlocking the synergies and enormous combat air potential that's resident in that F-35 Typhoon combination. To achieve this will be a team effort involving our industry partners. And this demands both a unity of purpose and a unity of effort if we are to be successful with Team Typhoon and indeed Team Tempest. I can report that the prospects of success are good. Charles, I'd like to thank you and other industry partners for the way that they have supported us in the delivery of Project Centurion for Typhoon. We will continue to invest in and upgrade Typhoon, including its radar, defensive aids, and weapons, all of which will be essential to maintaining Typhoon's position as the backbone of the UK's combat air capabilities for the next couple of decades. But it's not just about capability. It's also about capacity. Size matters. It was recognised in SDSR 2015 that we needed to invest in and grow our combat air mass, the wisdom which has been reinforced by subsequent events, I would argue. Just witness our simultaneous deployments this summer to the Middle East, the Falklands, the Black Sea, whilst we continue to provide persistent defence of our national airspace. The technical developments of Typhoon and the arrival of that game-changing F-35 Lightning demands we lead-turn technology with our thinking. I believe that we have always been a service that leverages technology for operational advantage. But we will fail if we simply try to force new capabilities into old doctrinal moulds. This means we need to change our lexicon and move on from irrelevant terms like fighter, bomber, and understand the consequences of this emerging operational paradigm that blurs the distinction between home and away, war and peace, physical and virtual, air and space, strategic and tactical. And this requires people, whether they're in the cockpit or in the KEOC, who are tactically excellent, competent in the art of campaigning, and who think to win. Only by doing so can we ensure that we maintain the intellectual and therefore the combat edge over our adversaries. Another critical element of this edge will be our exploitation of the network of sensors, shooters, and deciders. Combat cloud, if you like. Now, whilst the concept of network-enabled warfare is not new, It will be central to the delivery of our ambition as an Air Force to become integrated, an integrated Air Force that recognises information as the lifeblood, with people, processes and practices that allow it to respond rapidly and decisively to changing threats at all levels of warfare. Our aircraft will be increasingly defined by what they contribute to the network and how they exploit the information on the network. Moreover, how fast we reprogram our aircraft will be as important as how fast we fly them. This aligns with the USAF General Goldfein's comments when he said, "When I see an F-35, I don't see a fighter. I see a computer that happens to fly." So, as we look beyond Typhoon and towards Tempest and our next generation combat air capabilities, we must think from the inside out. That is, we must start with the computer, all the systems and the information exploitation and exchange capability we need before we build the platform around it. We must also consider connectivity from the outset, including how we connect a range of off-board systems, whether they be the swarming UAVs or other systems in space or cyber domains. Leading the way and also leading Team Tempest is the RAF's Rapid Capabilities Office. Now, whilst it's less than 2 years old, the RCO, I believe, has transformed our approach to acquisition and has proven to be a highly successful, disruptive force that is a catalyst for positive, innovative change within the RAF and perhaps the wider defence sector. I believe at the heart of this success has been the ability to first, as they say, supercharge the process rather than subvert it. But secondly and importantly, to form diverse teams that comprise the warfighters, the scientists, the industrialists, supported by organic, commercial, financial and legal expertise. I think to further underline the RCO's credentials as an innovative organisation, I'm delighted to tell you that the Innovation Council and the Institute of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange has conferred the Investor in Innovations Award on the RCO just this week. Team Tempest will need every ounce of innovative zeal they possess to meet the challenges posed by the Chief of the Air Staff. The first challenge is to reverse the orthodoxy that the spiral development of capability means the spiralling costs of programs, which in turn forces us to delay and or descope our ambitions. In short, the Chief of the Air Staff wants affordable high technology and through this greater combat air mass. But he also wants capability quicker and has set ambitious timelines for Team Tempest to move from that concept to capability delivery much more rapidly. And lastly, he wants to ensure that the capability of Tempest advances in pace with technological opportunity and threat evolution. These are significant challenges, but ones that I am confident Team Tempest can and will meet. I will conclude now with perhaps two, some call them hobby horses, I call them critical requirements of any combat air capability, which I fear are too often not given the prominence they deserve. First is the need to deliver a logistical and communication support solution that enables the platform to be as agile in its basing as it is maneuverable in the air. That is a support solution that is lean and efficient in peacetime and resilient but affordable in conflict. My second requirement is to look carefully at how we exercise, train and prepare, both as part of the air component and the joint force. This needs to include the development of appropriate information sharing protocols when operating with other countries. I believe there is much more we can do in this area with our industrial partners to transform our approach. Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Stuart. Charles.
Thank you, Stu. and good evening, everybody. So I'm very happy to be here tonight because this strategy, frankly, means a great deal to BAE Systems and a great deal to me personally. I mean, coming as it does in the centenary year of the Royal Air Force, we've got 100 years of achievement behind us, and this really paints the picture of the next 100 years. BAE Systems and its predecessor companies, as all of you in the room are aware, designed, manufactured and supported aircraft for the RAF from the very beginning of the RAF. We have leading edge technology, engineering and innovation, advanced manufacturing, and a whole team of dedicated and skilled people, as John already alluded to this evening. And some of the things I think we're good at is not just supplying the equipment, but the through-life support of that, the training, the maintaining and the supporting of the system as it goes through. And obviously, in the context of the future combat air, this is very important for us that we think about this from the outset. We work side by side with the RAF to improve efficiency and availability and make sure the contracting models incentivize us for that. And I think through doing that, we have a good understanding of the frontline requirements. Clearly, the government role is very important in this, investing in next-generation aircraft, technology, skills, infrastructure, and promoting UK interests and exports around the world. And I have to say we get great support from Richard and his team to that end. We have century-long partnerships, both across the military, industry, government, and that has created a world-leading aviation industry, and it's important for us in the industrial context that we maintain that. For me, the combat air strategy, allows us to enter a new chapter. It's an ambitious vision for the future, and a lot of work obviously went into it, and it's not just around the military capability. It's also, and I think the reason I'm here is to talk about the industrial context, it's all around the economic prosperity. It's worth reflecting that this sector delivers a turnover of around £6 billion a year, and for the past decade or so has contributed around 80% of annual UK defence exports. BAE's UK air business alone makes a significant contribution to that. We benefit the length and breadth of the UK through operations and supply chain companies. So, for example, we have about 12,500 employees working for us in the sector, but then we have close to 40,000 other employees, both directly or indirectly employed through our supply chains. So there you've got around 50,000 total employees in this sector. And 70% of our employees are specifically engaged in engineering and engineering-related positions. So it's a huge part of the engineering footprint within the UK, which again just underlines the importance of the strategy in taking this forward. We have some great examples in service today. I mean, Hawk is one of those. I mean, there's over 1,000 Hawks have been built or on order in various nations. There was an initial investment from the UK government of around £900 million on the Hawk programme. But by the middle of this decade that we're in, those exports the exports themselves had generated over £11.5 billion. So that figure continues to rise as we sell additional Hawks, and obviously the recent Qatar order that we had helps with that, with an additional 9 Hawks. So that, I think, is a great return on initial investment. Typhoon is a similar example. It's obviously the RAF's flagship combat aircraft, and the UK in that so far has invested around just over £15 billion. And so far, it generated over £28 billion, and that doesn't include, in fact, the most recent order that we signed. So again, a very good return on investment for the UK government. So if we look ahead now to the next century, I think it's fair to say that the UK combat air strategy does outline a very ambitious vision for the future. I mean, it's a programme that we've obviously been working on with the government for quite some time. And at Farnborough, we unveiled the Team Tempest, which was part of that was unveiling the concept aircraft and the industrial teaming behind it. We are absolutely committed to playing a key role, together with the industry partners, the RAF, and the UK government. The strategy highlights the criticality of UK technology, skills, and intellectual property in order to maintain an operational advantage and freedom of action and secure our national prosperity. It's fair to say that it's only possible if the UK maintains a dynamic and innovative industrial base with a skilled and productive workforce, which in turn will generate significant exports, highly skilled jobs across extensive supply chain, investments in next generation technology and talent, and we believe it'll be the lifeblood to the UK's long-term success. And the UK Combat Air Strategy allows us to get behind that and invest both alongside the government as an industrial grouping and drive this forward. Partnering with the government, academia and the SMEs to develop the next generation technology. I mean, good examples obviously are things like building on the Taranis concept that we have, the future cockpit design that we showed at Farnborough, but these are all things that we're working on behind the scenes as part of the Combat Air Strategy. It's clear that the combat air system will need to operate effectively in the most contested, congested, and complex environments, and speed, adaptability, and agility are essential. And I notice a long list of other comments coming from Stu, or requirements coming from Stu. Team Tempest, we think, is taking an innovative approach, very much around modular design, making sure that we have a capable core, but keeping the absolute core, in a sense, as small as we can to give us as much flexibility within the design as we can. And that allows rapid change and growth factored in from the start. We know that a platform, an air platform, will change dramatically in the 40 or 50 years that it might be in service. So trying to make sure that you think about that from the start and allow, with that flexibility, things like rapid enhancements, the flexible infrastructure, open architecture, and the capabilities to evolve as the platform evolves. We recognize that the system will need to be highly capable, the built-in flexibility up front, which will allow upgradability, make sure that the connectivity is up from the front, and affordability is a big, important part of this. And that is where, in a sense, agreeing on the minimal requirements that go into the baseline airframe is so important, so that the rest of it then becomes flexible around that. So we're working with government and the Team Tempest partners of Rolls-Royce, Leonardo, MBDA and ourselves, of course, to develop and invest in these new technologies, and in so doing maintaining operational advantage and freedom of action. And the intention is to work, as we've said very clearly, to work with international partners in a very collaborative consortium. And I think that's where the flexibility up front becomes so important when it comes to working with international partners. So by a couple of examples, I think the cooperative operation between unmanned and manned, I think, is clear from the outset. Things like directed energy weapons, dynamic systems to adapt the platform for its different roles, extensive use of artificial intelligence and advanced processing to enable quicker decision-making by pilots. And I think it's also fair to say that the approach to support and training will need to evolve to meet the needs of a very complex, integrated future combat air system. And we're developing the technologies and approaches that we believe will be needed to meet those future needs. So, within BAE, we have world-leading capabilities, and the technology of the Typhoon will continue to be developed. I think one of the great things about the program is many of the technologies that will find their way into Tempest will be deployed and perfected on the Typhoon platform, which is great news for all the users of the Typhoon platform around the world. It basically means that we will continue to develop in terms of avionics, radar capability, weapon systems, and so on and so forth. And many of these will be perfected and, as I said, refined on the Typhoon platform. But we are very mindful of the fact that we need to develop affordable next-generation technologies, and that helps us to become the international partner of choice. At the same time, we've got to continue to invest in our people and our skills and our expertise. I mean, many of them in the room know that we are a major contribution in skills development within the UK. We have over 2,000 apprentices and graduates in training on any one year. And we are, obviously working closely with UK government to both measure and plan the future talent pipeline. And I think one of the great things about the Combat Air Strategy is it allows us to talk to the young people who are undergoing, in their engineering or considering a career in STEM, we can paint a long-term picture for this, that, beyond Typhoon, get people excited about it, get young people excited about it so they come into the business and can see decades of opportunity ahead of them. And then the other piece that we've touched on already is around the international partnering, and we think this is absolutely fundamental, both to achieving the national goals, but also to make a viable commercial framework. For an airframe, it really only makes sense if you can sell several hundred of them, and outside of the US, certainly amongst NATO allies, it's very hard to do that without partnering, and that's why I think we've had this concept of international partnering in the program from the very outset. So from the UK, we think we have a unique network of capability collaborations, and we're working already with allies to build and establish new partnerships to deliver our future requirements. And this is an area we've got a great track record, both Jaguar, Tornado, Typhoon. I mean, we have a long track record of working closely with partners on these. We've got to balance our capabilities with budgets, international influence, prosperity, and industrial capabilities, all things that will be factored in. And frankly, we look forward to working with all of our partners to develop their systems alongside it. And that concept of built-in flexibility from the outset, I think, will be attractive to potential international partners, and at the same time allow us to underpin our UK's future prosperity and security. So with that, I'd say thanks very much, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you.
Sir Brian Burridge.
Good evening, and allow me to join up some of the dots that have led to where we are now with the combat air strategy. And the story really starts in earnest in 2009, when it was apparent to the DNS that there was a sustainability problem in the fixed-wing fast jet sector. And that led to a future combat air strategy, which was underpinned by a piece of very interesting RAND research. And I cite this because it gives an insight into the reality of this sector and what its engine room actually is. And they surveyed 33 companies who were engaged at the upper tier levels of fixed-wing military aircraft. They determined that there were 36,904 people in technical roles in those businesses. And of those, 29,000 were either primarily or solely engaged on fixed-wing military aircraft. But the really interesting thing is 50% of those, that 29,000, were engaged in design engineering at various points across the life cycle of the aeroplane. And the remainder, split in half, were either in the factory as touch labour or doing support and maintenance. Now, that former group is what creates indigenous intellectual property from, and that's an absolute key point, because from that comes the ability to create a system and export it. And that's what we tend to term in shorthand as noble work. So in looking at a program, the first question you ask is, what noble work is involved in it? And that, along with the science ecosystems outputs, which includes everything from university research departments, pretty much on average, a prime in this country will have contracts with 30 UK universities. That, coupled with the output of other labs, is the body of knowledge. And that's what's up for grabs now. And the reason I say that is because history has taught us we need to preserve and extend that body of knowledge. And it's not solely at the OEM level by any means. Supply chains are part of that ecosystem, not least in terms of sensors, weapons, systems that drive together capability. And it's very good to see recognition now that such companies have to be at the top table. That broke the mold in Tornado support, it broke the mold in Typhoon support, and it's in on the ground floor of Team Tempest. But don't forget, the integration skills that exist at OEM level are key aspects of IP. Now, just as a sideline of interest, in that RAND work, it was shown that technical employees, engineers and technicians, reach 50% productivity after 18 months and 90% after 5.5 years. So this is an ecosystem where you cannot easily expect to be able to shed labour and maintain the integrity of the body of knowledge. So we arrive at the end of that study with the conclusion that there needs to be a programme, probably an uninhabited combat air system, and that was, of course, what was driving some of the Anglo-French treaty work. We then fast forward to 2012 and the white paper, National Security Through Technology. People normally sigh when I mention that from this podium because I have relentlessly quoted page 12, footnote 6, 5 sentences on the definition of value for money. First sentence, value for money is the optimal combination of time, cost, and effectiveness within available resources. Straight out of the textbook, no problem. Sentence 3, value for money for each program is determined on a case-by-case basis depending on the circumstances. Okay. Sentence 5, the MOD does not consider wider employment, industrial or economic factors in its value for money assessments. Now, I was working for an Italian company. You try translating that into Italian in the environment in which other nations work. More particularly, it seemed to undermine the value of the body of knowledge. In other words, this stuff that gave you operational advantage and freedom of action, which underpins our national military capability, was no longer important. But we should remember that it is our onshore IP that allows us to do the modern equivalent of urgent operational requirements. It's that which allows us to do them safely, quickly, and in a way that we can explain to ministers, actually, this system is safe. And you can sign off on my target directive because we know how it works, because we can reach out and touch the body of knowledge. Conceptually, you could think of this as having 3 dimensions. A vertical, hierarchical, command-and-control-y type one, which is exactly what I've said. You know, convincing people it can be used in this way to do this thing, and yes, it's safe and it's legal. The second is horizontal or geographic, and it connects the warfighter in the cockpit to the software writer in the lab. And the third, probably the most significant, is a temporal dimension in that decisions made today in terms of research and development affect capability decades hence. So again, supply chains are major contributors to this, and both in technology terms and in the elegance of their subsystems, but also in their manufacturing know-how. And they too have important intellectual property, and 6 years ago that seemed to be forgotten. But now the Renaissance, and National Shipbuilding Strategy and the Combat Air Strategy point to a different, more partnered approach. And in the Shipbuilding Strategy, publication of this strategy marks the start of an intensive phase of transformation. Government and industry will work together in order to ensure success, and it goes on. Underpinning that, as well as the Combat Air Strategy, the work by Philip Dunn, just shows the value and the depth of the military aerospace industry. And in the Combat Air Strategy, the antidote to page 12, footnote 6, if you'll forgive me, it says, the UK will take a strategic approach to combat air using a national value framework, that maximises the overall value the UK derives from the sector. Will seek to balance military capability, international influence, economic and prosperity benefits. Fantastic, absolutely right. But it comes at a cost, and the development costs of the next generation fast jet combat aircraft is not insignificant. And Janes did some work in the summer, and they posited that across a European endeavour, it would probably be $50 billion. And they base that on their research into the R&D costs of the F117 and the B2, which ran out in then-year dollars at $144 billion. And F-35, they posit 270 billion, and I've seen figures as high as 350. But as this strategy outlines, international collaboration is absolutely at its core, because there's no other way of amortizing those sorts of overheads without a large offtake. So we come to collaboration, which has been an unpopular subject in the defence acquisition business over a number of years. But taking a long-term view to the way in which you intend to framework your collaboration, and beginning now, will help enormously. The first point, of course, is it's very helpful if there's a common view on the nature of the end state of collaboration in terms of what capability are we trying to achieve, the likely numbers of aircraft required, the level of investment required, and the ultimate cost of the aircraft, both in terms of its flyaway price and also its supportability, its through-life cost. And that is particularly significant to many customer nations now. Probably the most compelling drivers of this, though, are design flexibility, which Charles has run over, and the support solution. And I will leave the matter of alignment of politics across a collaborative environment to questions. But design flexibility is the technology is with us so that we can do two things. We can make design flexible, we can use open architecture, we can use plug and play, and we have the ability now through the definition of application program interfaces such that other nations can take their sensors and plug them in. And that's significant, because that's what most customers are now asking for. The world has changed in terms of the market. But the best athlete approach can also be applied in those circumstances, unrelated to the ironclad hand of work share. And the approach allows potential export customers the ability to determine which bits they want to manufacture, which bits they want to develop, and which bits they want to integrate. And support solutions are the same. I mean, the support solution has to be designed from the ground up. So industry, through support solutions, through the way that the UK do it, are incentivized to invest. Now, that's quite a new concept in some customer nations, but investing in commercial maintenance standards and facilities, investing in spares inventory, investing in information management, all these things are the tools that industry can use to satisfy the customer at the right level of availability, at the right level of cost. And these are not so common in other nations. So my conclusion is the market has changed, and the work that the UK Defence Solutions Centre have done to support this strategy points to that loud and clear. There are increasing opportunities for new technology and advanced manufacturing, but we cannot be beguiled by these aspects alone. Our research at the DSC in support of this strategy shows that we need to cast the net wider. Unfamiliar partners, perhaps, such as Japan. Equally, we need to be prepared to meet customer expectations, because their expectations are growing in parallel with increasing requirements for more capability at a lower price point, and that is a real challenge. And they're also looking for higher levels of control within the program. And defense programs in particular provide the opportunity to enrich industry, to develop the economy in a particular way. But these things can only really be done initially at a government-to-government level on the basis of a long-term and growing relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, if you could pull all that together in the next 10 minutes, and that'd be very helpful.
Good. John, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll allow me, I just want to start by thanking some of the members of the team who pulled the strategy together and are now responsible for implementing it, some of whom are here this evening, and I would like to just recognise the commitment and dedication that they put into this work. Can I also thank you, John, for the support of RUSI in particular, for your help in developing the strategy. Your and Trevor's help, your expertise, your experience were invaluable to our team in developing the work. And these thanks, I think, extend to colleagues across industry, in academia, and yes, in other government departments. This development of this strategy was a truly collaborative team effort. It reflects a broad range of views and objectives. And so it should be no surprise, I hope, that this sort of inclusive team approach is reflected throughout the strategy itself. The strategy was launched with much fanfare in July. We hope you noticed. RAF 100, of course, meant the aerospace eyes of the world were on Farnborough International Air Show even more than usual. And as the strapline on the strategy makes clear, this really does lay out an ambitious vision for the future. And importantly, it's a vision endorsed by the Prime Minister in a truly cross-government national approach. And we're already working with colleagues across government and industry on its delivery. I'll limit my remarks perhaps to a few key fundamentals to help stimulate this discussion. The first, why we needed a strategy and why now. You've heard some of this already, but it's very simple. It's about choice. Not making final choices now, but ensuring we maintain the UK's ability to choose how we deliver our future combat air capability. Without this strategy and the related investment in Tempest, we would have lost that choice. It's simple. And why is that? Because at its heart, the strategy represents a national decision to retain the skills and technology required to be a world leader in this sector. You all know the UK's long, successful history of delivering world-class capability, both nationally and internationally, underpinned by over 100 years of government and industry investment. But as Brian's described, we'd reached the point where a decision was needed, quite simply whether we wanted to stay in the game. So the strategy doesn't define what, how, or with whom will deliver the next generation of combat air capability. But it secures continued choice in how we deliver operational advantage and freedom of action as we begin the next 100 years of national air power. In 2015, our decision to upgrade and extend Typhoon in service ensured that Typhoon will remain a highly effective cutting-edge capability, both for the RAF and our partners, for decades to come. Typhoon, alongside F-35 Lightning, will form the backbone of the UK's combat air capability for many years. But this decision also increased the gap in time between major air system design phases, placing the critical engineering skills which are key to sustaining choice at significant risk. So the strategy reaffirmed our commitment to the Future Combat Air System Technology Initiative, known as FCAS-TI, which was announced in that 2015 SDSR. And this programme, which is already in its delivery phase, is carefully designed to identify and reduce risks to our ability to choose and deliver the next generation of capability. This initiative will deliver over £2 billion of joint government and industry investment to keep the UK at the forefront of global combat air technology development. It will ensure that the UK retains the technical capability to define and decide how we deliver globally competitive next-generation capability, maturing technologies, including open mission systems, which can change the paradigm around international partnering. And it will demonstrate our credibility as a potential leader of a next-generation acquisition program. Perhaps most importantly, it preserves the skills that Brian described to deliver the national intellectual property that we require. Next, I thought I'd pull out some of the core concepts which underpin the approach in the strategy. Brian, I'm glad you mentioned the notion of national value. It is absolutely at the core of this strategy. It's not rocket science, but it is as difficult to achieve in practice as it is simple as a concept. It needs clear definition, broad consensus, a different sort of evidence base, and decision makers able to weigh up and trade across policy, capability, and affordability choices. We will, of course, work in line with the Treasury Green Book, but Brian, I think we have genuinely crossed a Rubicon in that definition of value for money that you read out. Next, incremental and spiral development. Through investment in world-leading technologies and subsystems on Typhoon, such as the EJ200 engine, E-scan radar, and Spear weapons family, we're building the basis for the next generation system. Rapid and incremental upgrading of software changes the paradigm from rather clunky descriptions of generations of aircraft and ends an approach which has seen us retiring systems when they're at the peak of their capabilities. Our plans are now based on the continuous development and reuse of capability and treating the platform as just another subsystem. Doing this reduces cost and risk to the next generation programs and squeezes the maximum return from our investment in technology. We're also driving transformational change across the enterprise, and all of our speakers, I think, have described we're already seeing this in action. That Team Tempest partnership is genuinely driving different sorts of relationships and behaviors. It's aligning incentives and providing genuinely shared costs and benefits. And this will be the catalyst to test and drive behavioral change more widely across the enterprise, in industry, and yes, in government. Because together we now have a shared interest in driving down costs and increasing pace and agility in delivery. Fundamentally, this industry, like so many others, must now ensure that technology is a driver of affordability and not of cost. As Director of Strategic Programs, as you've heard, I'm responsible for the combat air strategy and for large parts of its implementation. And I think, just to update you, we've moved very quickly over the last 3 months to get off the start line. In addition to the approach on Typhoon upgrades, F-35 and FCAS TI, the strategy also importantly launched the Next Generation Combat Air Acquisition Programme. The team, led by Air Commodore Dan Storr, is now in place, and it's developing options for next generation acquisition. They're on track, I trust, to deliver a strategic outline case by the end of 2018, and this will be followed by an outline business case submitted in 2020, and in 2025, the full business case, formerly known as a main gate. And in parallel, of course, they're already working with allies to explore and understand the choices for how we might deliver the next generation capability. The strategy is absolutely profoundly international in its approach. One of our objectives in writing the strategy was to reinvigorate the international debate around next generation capability. And since the launch, we have received a great deal of interest from our current and potential partners. A few key points on partnering. We're good at this. For decades, the UK has embraced international collaboration in combat air. Charles used the word unique, and we genuinely really do have a unique pedigree and breadth of partnering. Over 50 years of collaboration with European partners on Jaguar, Tornado, and Typhoon, a hugely successful operational technology and program partnering with the United States through Aviate Harrier and the F-35 program. Globally, our approach is based on supporting the long-term national interests of our partners. As examples, working in India, establishing local production of the Hawk Advanced Jet Trainer, supporting Turkey with the TFX program, as well as in the Middle East, and more recently in Japan. Done badly, of course, partnering and acquisition can have real disadvantages in time and cost. But sophisticated international partnering offers the UK the best opportunity to deliver our military capability requirements affordably. In doing so, to maximise our national value and working with our partners to deliver their own national objectives. Technology, including open systems architectures, enables a much more agile and flexible collaborative approach, an approach where countries can enter and leave a programme. Partnership need not be in the whole system. Partnering at a subsystem level can enable national fits and variants for partners or export customers. We will keep our options open and find those sweet spots for mutual benefit. I describe the approach we're taking towards future partnering as an open systems approach, responsive, scalable, mutually beneficial, and agile, and genuinely open to a range of different partnering models and objectives in its design. I think our respect for others' objective sets us apart as a potential partner. So just to finish, to wrap it up, the delivery of the strategy secures choice for how the UK delivers its capability, looking forward to the next 100 years of the Royal Air Force. Investment in Typhoon and UK technologies through the FCAS Technology Initiative are designed to enable choice in how we get there for the next generation capability. The critical decision now is what, how, and with whom we deliver that capability. And that's the focus of our work as we go to initial decisions in late 2020. This won't be easy, and we face incredibly difficult decisions that will challenge our vision along the way. This must not become a normal acquisition program. It has to be different in pace, agility, and behaviours across the enterprise. We recognise the scale of the challenge we have, particularly in delivering next generation capability by 2035. But time can be a valuable driver. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. That was remarkable. So it seems to me, ladies and gentlemen, that within months of firing the gun on the commencement of this acquisition program, we have an hour on the record from the folk who are at the heart of its delivery, 7 years before a main gate submission. I think that's quite remarkable. Over to you guys. What I'd like to do, if you'll allow, is curtail any statements and just get people to ask questions. I think it would be a huge mistake with this panel just for people to articulate their perspective. So if we could stick to questions, I would be forever grateful.